Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this episode we're welcoming back our friends Evan and Stephen Strong, coming to us from down under in Australia. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good. Happy to be here again.
Definitely.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, we do appreciate that.
No, I love having you on. You guys were on once before, and in that show we talked about sort of some of the Aboriginal legends, lore, history, a lot more alien or extraterrestrial than I had expected, but that was a fun and pleasurable surprise for me. And I think now we're going to go maybe a little bit older, or maybe the precursors, or I don't really know what it is. We're going to talk about Lemuria. I'm sure in the course of this, one of you will pronounce it correctly for me, and I'm sure I'll continue to say it the opposite way.
Maybe not. Right. I don't know, mate. We're not sure who the Lemurian thought police and pronunciation police are, but we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, because I know the animals are lemurs, but I know when people talk about mu, they talk about mu like the Greek letter. So who knows which is which, and what which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I'm sure the Greek letter came later. In any event, our good friend Luke Michael Ironside has been on the show before and talked to us about the 5 root races, and in his dissertation, which was really just going by other people's work, the Lemurians were one of the root races that seemed to be, mirroring the 5 ages of man, which I think the order was Polarian, Hyperborean, Lemurian, Atlantean, and now the modern age, which I guess started with the Greeks and Sumerians and to now. Whether that's correct or not, not 100%, doesn't necessarily matter, because your presentation, your information is going to be independent of that, and it's going to be dedicated to Lemuria. And I'm really excited to hear what you gentlemen know about the subject. So without further ado, I first of all, tell the folks a little bit about yourselves. I know you have lots of events and activities, and then you can just start where you want to start.
Okay, well, just about ourselves. Primarily, I was a primary school and a high school teacher, secondary teacher. And as I became more involved in secondary education, I was focused primarily on Aboriginal education and Aboriginal years 11 to 12 curriculum, and then 7 to 10 I was involved in that. And what took place is the more involved I got in that, the more I got, one, the trust of original people and the parents of the kids. We were working in Moree, which is about 50% original, 50% non-original in the school at that stage. And it became apparent to me that what I had contributed towards the Aboriginal Studies content was primarily wrong. And it backed me into a corner. Do I continue teaching a course that is inherently mistaken, or do I try and correct it? So I tried to correct it, and doing that with the Department of Education is like walking on water. It just isn't going to happen. They know the answer to everything. That's what education is about, teaching the answer, not asking the question. And in the end, I had to make a decision. Do I continue researching down this path or resign from teaching? And I made the poor economic decision to resign from teaching because I was on the top of the pay scale. And for the last, 15 years, we've been doing archaeology all over this country. There is one thing I'd like to add to that unlike archaeologists who do archaeology representing a university or a business or a mining company, which is more than likely the case.
Especially in Australia.
Particularly in Australia, there's nothing more sacred than a big fat hole in the ground. But we don't do it that way. We wait for the elders to contact us, to invite us onto country, and then we work with the elders to find out not the answer, because they have that. Our job is to make up questions that go with the answer they've given us. So we approach this differently insofar as when we go onto country, we make sure ceremony is given and we're asked to come onto country first. We don't stick our nose in where we're not wanted. So primarily, that's my part of the story, and over to you, Evan.
Yeah, so mine's a little bit different. Well, obviously, I grew up in the same town. There was teaching and whatnot, so was involved just by exposure. But what happened was I went to uni and was studying psychology, and then for a whim went, I might do some archaeology and anthropology. Why not? And did, and at the time I went, well, it's just for fun because, I'm not going to use any of this in the real world, am I? Mind you, that's all that I use now. But, so I remember doing those units and being really interested in that. Plus then growing up where we did in various places, we did come in contact with the metaphysical aspect of original culture as well. So in some sense, that was my background. And mind you, I am using a little bit of the psychology to kind of analyse some of what is going on in the world right now. So it's funny how it all comes back. But we kind of started to read a lot of Gnostic texts, so the Nag Hammadi library, and then because of our background with original culture, we kind of started to see some parallels between the two, and then we wrote some books, and then someone said, this is a really cool idea, but you guys aren't great writers. So we kind of came from that, and then they helped us get it to a point. I think it ended up in the University Press of America, the first 3 books. But it was comparing Gnostic philosophy
with the dream.
And that was kind of our basis. And then from there, we've just branched outwards and gone in directions we never really thought that we would. And one of them would be Lemuria. If you'd ask us at the start, you guys are going to be looking at artifacts from there and talking about that, we'd go, no, we're not. Well, why would we do that? But as the years have unfolded and time's gone by, there's definitely a Lemurian connection to Australia. I think the first of it we came across and was elders saying, we have another word for Australia.
That's right, yeah.
Moo. A few elders do call Australia.
They did start that. I mean, it's a gradual process. Yep. What we did was I was given ceremony by probably the most important Old-Way elder in this country, Kano Walker, and we were told to go out, find the black fella's story and put it in a way that the white fellas can understand. And that was primarily what our mission has been ever since. So our job, and as we've walked along, as Evan said, to begin with, we were just going to do archaeology. We weren't going to do aliens. We weren't even going to touch that. That's Von Däniken's problem, not ours. We certainly weren't going to do Atlantis and Lemuria, all those things, and Yowies. We weren't going to do those things. But our brief was to tell the elders' story. And as we got to talk to more elders, these stories about aliens and Lemuria and Atlantis kept reappearing, and they became a central part of the ancient history of this country.
We really didn't want to be yet another archaeologist that walks in going, oh, well, no, that stuff's nonsense. I'm just going to talk about the things I want to talk about. The rest of it is inconvenient to me, so therefore I'm going to discount it or pay it barely any lip service. That wasn't our mandate to do. It was to tell their story, not tell them what their story is and edit it down to something that was more convenient for
the mainstream
and academia, which is pretty.
Well, let me tell you what I've heard about Lemuria other than what I've already said, and I'm sure I'll forget some things, but it's not particularly important. But I've heard anything that it sort of sprouted from the bottom of where India is now, the Indian subcontinent, basically made an L, included Australia, and in some cases went all the way across Africa, Madagascar, and in some cases all the way across to South America. I suspect that latter part was there because there's lemurs in parts of Southeast Asia, in Madagascar, and in South America, and because it's Lemuria, they wanted to tie the name of the animal lemur to the continent, which seems like an interesting part of retrofitting, because that seems like it would be, I mean, that's not a continent, that's a supercontinent. That's like, I mean, not that Asia and Europe together, isn't of similar size. And I've had more than one guest point out to me, the definition of continent is rather imprecise. But I am, I guess I should start with what were sort of the borders of Lemuria and when was Lemuria?
Well, that's interesting because we do get we've got an off-world guide. We've got our on-world guides, which are elders. We've got our off-world guide, which is an alien. And he made a point about Lemuria. I think we need to start as a base because we've asked him when did Lemuria become extinct? And his answer is never. It's very important we understand that. When you talk about Atlantis, you talk about land masses where there was some sort of binding principles where different lands became part of the Atlantean Empire. When it comes to Lemuria, and you talk about this massive continent, which we've heard that too, that goes from Madagascar to the shores of South America, man, that's not a continent. That's basically half the planet turning into land. Our understanding is not so much that it was one homogeneous land mass as such, that it was more a confederation of lands and islands and a larger landmass that made Lemuria. Now, what we've been told about Lemuria is that people were welcome to visit Lemuria and they were regarded as visitors, and that didn't matter if it was off-world or on-world, made no difference. But to stay there was not an option, was it, Evan?
No, not permanently. No. Just visitors only.
Yeah, so we've got to understand when we talk about the two major empires of the past, one was based on geography, and the other one was based more on philosophical grounds, on binding principles.
So we did get a dreaming story about the geographic connection between Australia and India.
Yeah. There are dreaming stories in Australia about in the way distant past, and we're going into 6-7 figures here, of original people walking to India. And there is a dreaming story, I'm glad you brought it up, Evan, where the women got sick of this happening because they walked to India, and in it describes they fought people that had long hair with a turban wrapped around it, which is obviously Sikhs. And the story is the women got sick of the men going off to fight, And while the men went off to fight, they came with their digging sticks and separated India from Australia, which is like the continental plates we talk about it, which is fascinating because that's what they did. And when the men came back from fighting, they realised they couldn't get back to Australia because they'd been separated. And it was only through their magic they came back to Australia. And from thence it was agreed they would never go back to India to fight. So that's a dreaming story. Now, as you know, Jeff, often dreaming stories are turned into myths and legends. And as soon as we hear that word, we think, oh, yes, it's a golden book and made up. No, most myths and legends are based on fact that we might add things to over a period of time, but there's a base underneath it. So, yes, I do believe that India, Australia, and probably parts of Asia at one stage were co-joined, but they've all separated a long, long period again.
I noticed on social media, Zealandia is drifting hard, which is a
New Zealand,
and then it arches up to New Caledonia, and then that turns into another supercontinent.
Yeah, but I'm inclined to think, Jeff, that when we go into the Pacific Ocean and we're saying, oh, that was all part of it, I think it was, but I'm not so convinced that it was all one homogeneous landmass. I think there might have been, like New Zealand would have had more land, and some of the other ones would, but I still think that when we go to that side, there would have been stretches of water that it was still the confederation of Lemuria, but I don't believe it was the continent that went all that distance.
And then, as for dating, how old it is?
Oh, dating, we're going to be a bit radical here, and we've got reasons for saying that, which I'm sure will come up over the period of time there. We believe that Lemuria and Atlantis, in their basic form, in their most archaic form, when both groups were purely hunter-gatherer, I think we're looking at a date of around 1 million years. And then soon after that, Lemuria and Atlantis went in different directions. And we believe that as Atlantis went further into the more sedentary sort of area where there's more cities and stuff like that, they started to separate from Atlantis. And we know there was a time when all Atlanteans were banished from ever entering Atlantis again. So I think that we're looking at two different approaches to living and two different ways of categorizing the groups that lived there.
But they were contemporaneous or at least overlapping.
Oh, yes. Yeah, for a long period of time they were contemporaneous, but our sources are adamant. Lemurians saw through the fact that the Atlanteans, let's be honest, and some people get very excited by Atlantis, and there's a great philosopher that once said about Atlantis, look but don't stare. And I think it's a very important point. Atlantis was a place that started with the intentions to be heaven on earth, and it ended up being hell on earth through its own faults and through its own mistakes.
It's hubris and pride.
Pride and arrogance and the fact that they believed they were the top of the list. But having said that, we do know when they were banished from from Lemuria, they would not leave any clues as to why that happened, except they said, just don't go there anymore. And we believe that's because the Lemurians were the keepers of earth magic. And that was something that many, many continents at different times, including Egypt and others, have come to this place to learn about.
So that's
the real basic of this. And they were the keepers, we believe, the original people of today, and the Sadhus of India, I'm not leaving them out, are the keepers of the ancient Lemurian tradition of earth magic.
So a lot of the myths and legends are that it was the Atlanteans who shared this information with the Egyptians, then they went to the Greeks and others. And what you're saying is no, the Atlanteans basically kept it to themselves. It was the Lemurians who did mostly through their contact, or at least I'm surmising through their contact with India way back when, and it went from India and migrated west.
Well, no, I'm thinking that, I do believe because we've actually got the 3 rings from Atlantis and another one that's come since. I do believe at the start, because there's a ring, which we've also got, that commemorated the meeting of East versus and West, which is Atlantis and Lemuria. And at that stage, it was going to be one homogeneous global community. That was the beginning. And it was meant, I think it was formed with the best of intentions. And then things within, I mean, you've got to remember the Greeks were leaving this hint behind when they said, don't make a city of more than 50,000 because it will implode upon itself. Now, where'd they get that from? Because even Athens at that stage wasn't 50,000. So where are they getting those warnings from? We believe those warnings come from Atlantis. I think Atlantis is primarily the source behind the Egyptian part of this story insofar as technology. But we do know the Egyptians came to Australia seeking spiritual wisdom. So I believe there's always been on this planet for quite some time. Those two civilizations coexisted for quite some time peacefully. And then probably for the last half of the time, they just divorced from each other. And the Lemurians decided whatever they want to do, it's got nothing to do with us and we want nothing more to do with them.
So in the most oversimplistic way possible, which is that the Egyptians sort of got the best of both worlds from Atlantis and Lemuria, but sort of their neighbors to the north of the Mediterranean in Greece and Thrace and Italy and you know whatever else sort of only got what the Atlanteans gave them and only the more philosopher's stone kind of information from Lemuria came later, or they only had bits and pieces of it.
I think that's a fairly good summation of what took place.
Yeah.
And I've got to make the point that because we've had all four of the rings, the three rings that Tolkien spoke of and the one that came well before, and we've been given the content and the narrative would go with those rings, I can tell you at one stage, the aliens were deceived, weren't they, Evan? They thought that, I mean, the aliens have come here for one reason, and people should never be asking about if they're here, but why is the important part. And they thought that what was happening in Atlantis is why they come, didn't they? So they moved down here and started living with them, but they made the mistake of directly interfering with the business of humans, and they don't do that anymore because of what happened with Atlantis. And one of the things they did was they were responsible for putting the spells in those three rings that Tolkien speaks about. And of course, at the same stage, there were also rings being made for Lemuria.
And we've got those.
And we've got them too. We've got both. And I think it's 8 objects from Lemuria and 4 from Atlantis. And all of them have a base, metallic base of what is called orichalcum. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, Jeff, but that's the metal that Pliny the Elder spoke of, that Plato spoke of, and that Homer spoke of. That was the metal that they said was unique to Atlantis. Well, it was and it wasn't. In one form, the form in Atlantis, which is made of 5 elements, copper, zinc, nickel, iron, and lead. In Atlantis, those are made in a way where 99.5% of the rings that are made of copper and zinc. And the other 3 elements are like homeopathic drops. But when you come to Lemuria, they have the same metals, don't they, Evan? But it's not 99.5% copper and zinc. It might be 95, it might be 88%. And the variations with the other 3 elements is much more dramatic and varied. And they throw in other objects like titanium and gallium and cadmium and all sorts of things, all sorts of metals that we haven't used until the last 100 years are all found in the Lemurian rings.
Some are weird byproducts of smelting other 2 metals together.
Well, there's one there. One ring we've got is 6.89% gallium. And gallium is a byproduct of, I think, steel and aluminium when it's melted at 4,000 degrees. And then you get 0.1. This is 6.89. And it's from a ring that was found at Angkor Wat. Well, not found. It was stolen by the soldiers during the bombing of Cambodia with a metal detector. They found a couple there. Now, the question is, what in God's name is gallium doing inside that particular metal? And we've got to understand that both the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria on a technological level were far more advanced than we are today. So it's a really difficult story to try and work out the division points, why this happened, and the completion points, which we think is a younger Dryas, around 12,000 years ago.
There's also rumours of tall black people living in Cambodia too.
That's why we heard this from a couple of tour directors who'll be telling people late at night when they were a little bit more free with their words, didn't they, Evan? They start saying, before the Chinese come, no, there were giants. Aboriginal, they said they looked exactly like Australian Aboriginal people. They were 10 foot tall. They were running the country until the Asians came down.
Well, that's fascinating because
bits and pieces.
I mean, in most of my journeys, which is just doing the podcast and talking to guests and reading some stuff, whatnot, the giants are almost always white with red hair or white and blonde, and this is the first, and which I actually find really, really refreshing because I figure why would giants only be it seems very convenient if you are if you're a white researcher and you only find white giants who lead to all the heroes and kings of old. So this is a bit refreshing. Though I have heard, tales of, certain Native American tribes that were taller than others and things like that. But I have I came across an article not too long ago, within the last month or so, when it originally dated from the discovery, I don't know, but they found from a submerged ship, they salvaged Oraculum. And it's so this metal that was mythical isn't mythical. They found
that's actually correct, mate. It was found in the 6th century BC galleon near Sicily, and actually it was put up on Wikipedia where they said, and I was looking this up. They said orichalcum is a mythical metal that's found in the mythical continent of Atlantis, and underneath there's a picture of orichalcum recovered. We've written to Wikipedia and said, man, if it's mythical, how come you got a photo of it? It can't be mythical. And what they said, this is the best part. They said, the Romans had made the orichalcum. No, these were made into ingots. They were taking them to Rome. They weren't taking them from Rome in ingot form. They were taking it to Rome and they made them into coins.
Well, you can say what you want about Rome, but they it's not like they left a dearth of things behind them. I mean, their records are all over. Their roads still exist. I mean, if they were the ones who made that metal, there'd be signs of it all over the Roman world and beyond. So, yeah,
Pliny the Elder said in the 1st century BC that all orichalcum was gone. Right. He said that, and Pliny the Elder is one of the great Roman historians, and he was quite adamant. He was adamant about what was made up of, and I've told you the 5 elements, and he said it was gone. Now, Plato, when he spoke about that with Anthemius and Critias, he was speaking to someone who'd been to Egypt and had told them the story about orichalcum, and he said then that it was gone. So this business of the Romans making orichalcum, when we've got Greek philosophers, and we've also got a Homer in the 6th century, didn't we? He wrote a poem about orichalcum and dedicated to Aphrodite. And he said it was gone. So anyone that claims that the Romans were making orichalcum is wrong, because every record of the time said, no, man, well, what the Romans found was a last stash or store of this, and they were bringing it back to Rome. And it had been turned into ingots. And what's interesting about these ingots is their makeup. And it's fascinating, this, Jeff. Their makeup has got the same elements as the rings, but there's a big difference. With those ingots, which are for money and stuff like that, it is 95% copper and zinc, and 90 to 95%, and 5 to 10% the other 3 elements. Now, in the rings, the other 3 elements make up less than 0.5%. So when we talk about those 5 elements, as Wikipedia have, they need to be a little bit more nuanced than that. There is different type of orichalcum. Now, we know that orichalcum was placed in the main the main temple, the temple of Cleito and Poseidon, in the middle of Atlantis. And it was lined. The walls and the floors were lined in orichalcum, and at the top of a plinth made of orichalcum that Poseidon and Atlas put his writing was a little cap of gold. So the whole of that inner sanctum was made of orichalcum, which the Greeks called mountain gold and proper gold. This type of orichalcum, not the cruder stuff that's used to line other buildings all over Atlantis, which it did, it was used in the coins. It's got a different makeup. It's got the same elements, but it's completely different in the combination. The percentages are much different. So within the story of orichalcum, we find there are nuances and differences even within Atlantis.
Can I ask you a question? You've referenced rings several times. What are these rings, and what's the significance?
The rings are actually here with us.
Yeah.
So, as we said, some are found near Angkor Wat.
No. The rings from Atlantis have been found in two places, Jeff. Two were found in Australia at the same gold field, 5 years apart, by two different people with metal detectors that don't know each other. They both found, and one of them was found 1.5 meters beneath the surface at Hill End, and the other one was found 4.5 meters beneath the surface at Hill End. And both these rings are made of orichalcum. Both of them have the same insignias, 5 insignias, which are 5 different circles of different diameters. And then they've got 4 motifs, which is the Berber symbol for Atlas. Now, both these rings have 4 of the Berber symbols and 5 of the circles of different sizes. And as you may know, the inner sanctum of Poseidon, the temple there was wrapped around 5 rings of earth and water. Well, that's what those rings represent. They were found, 2 were found in Australia, 1 and 3, and number 2 was found in Scotland, wasn't it? A churchyard in Scotland. Yeah. And if you think about it, if you go to Atlantis, and if you go to the furthest part of the world going south from Atlantis, you'd end up in Australia. And if you went north, if you go past Scotland, you're up in the Arctic Circle. And our belief is that all of these rings were buried in the furthest pieces of land away from Atlantis because of the damage it caused. So those rings, those 3 we're talking about, yes, we have all 3 of them, but we've had some major issues with the rings.
Are there 2 more to 5? Is there a set of?
There's 3 that were made at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 2 I spoke about that have 5 and 4, both of them were cut, interfered with, messed around with, and then rejoined. And you can see the joins, can't you? And the other ring that just turned up from Atlantis has also got that cut on it too, which means those rings have been interfered with. The only ring that wasn't interfered with, the second one, which has 8 symbols just of Atlas, wasn't cut at all. Now, the ones that were cut were good rings. They were made with good intentions and changed. The one that wasn't cut, that I mistakenly thought was the good ring, wasn't cut because it was purely evil. And we've had some major issues with these rings trying to kill people. And yes, I'm using that word because that's exactly what's happened. And I've had to react to those rings before they ended up killing people, and I've had to deal with 2 of them.
So do these rings represent like the 5 elements like in sort of Chinese or Shintoism religion, or is it something entirely different? And then
something higher than that, something much higher, because what we've been told is once those rings were made, then the aliens put spells within those rings that were meant to bring out the very best of the people in Atlantis.
So the
problem
people
with these rings, if you've read Tolkien's book or seen his story about the rings, you'll know that when the ring bearer wears the ring, it doesn't possess the ring bearer. What it does is it goes deep into the soul of the person wearing the ring. And all of the secrets and all the things they've done in a past life is reactivated. Now, if the person holding this ring is a good person, has been for a long period of time, it brings out the best, doesn't it? But if it's been given to people who are evil, serial killers, murderers, people that don't care about others, psychopaths, the people who lead most of the country of the world today, those sort of people, it brings out the worst, and the rings then absorb that energy. And what happened in Atlantis was bad people got a hold of those rings, started to wear them, and that slowly pulled apart the whole of the continent, and eventually it just imploded upon itself because these rings brought out the very worst. And the story that Tolkien writes about, which is, by the way, as you know, is a Scandinavian myth, about those 3 rings possessing the people who take over it, is correct. It is correct. And those rings now, well, we didn't throw them in a volcano in Mordor. We couldn't do that. But 2 of the rings have been dealt with because they can't stay here on this planet without causing major problems. They were found now because the rings recognise right now. And by the way, if you talk to the 3 people who found these rings, they'll always start with, "You're not going to believe how I found this ring." When they do that, I say, "Well, I do now. You don't have to tell me." Because it's always about the fact the rings called them.
Right.
And were dug out. Now, in both cases, these people went to a place, they had a metal detector, but it wasn't a goldfield, was it? No. There were different reasons why they brought their metal detector out, and they still couldn't work out why.
But are you saying that in the narrative that they were found in Australia, these 2 of them, because people moved them from Atlantis because of their bad influence and took them? So it's not like the Lemurians wanted them. It's that somebody just went as far as they could and hid them.
Lemurians don't want those rings. I can tell you the very first time I had an Atlantean ring, number 1, and I put it alongside a Lemurian ring, which I've got. I laid them there that night, and in the morning my wife said, "If you ever put those 2 rings together, you're not sleeping in a bed with me."
Okay.
That night, we had books flying across the room. I'm telling you, that was smashing and banging that took place all night long. And we both knew what it was. It was the rings, but it was strange. I should have just separated them then. Those rings, the Lemurian rings, hate the Atlantean rings. And if I put an Atlantean ring on my finger, I'm not allowed to put the Lemurian ring on my finger for that day. They don't sit well together. They come from completely different stories.
Funny enough, the Lemurian rings have animals on them.
They do. Oh, some do, yeah. They have animals, yeah. And whereas the Atlantean rings have symbols. Okay. And they've got different functions, different purposes. But I can say the Atlantean rings, and I was working really hard to heal one of them. I couldn't heal the other 2. And we had guides from above. The aliens say they won't go near those rings. They wouldn't put them on their fingers if you paid them $1 billion.
Okay.
They are scared of them.
Well, they don't need $1 billion. I assume they have different money, but I get the point. Right. All right.
But they won't put it on whatever it is, okay, whatever you want to offer them. They are scared of those rings. In fact, the only time we've ever heard this off-world guide swear was when he spoke to those rings and called them the damn rings, didn't he?
All right. Well, I got us on the rings. It sounds like the rings are their own topic. I guess we should probably, I want to jump back to Lemuria, but I have to ask you, where are the aliens from?
Where are the aliens from? You name it, and they're from there. They're from everywhere.
Okay, so there's lots of them, and what? I'm sure that they have different names than we do, but they've been cross-referenced. But from what star systems that we might recognize, or
well, the best description I can give is we're in contact with an alien that is referred to as a script writer for this planet. He writes the script, the major events that are going to take place, and has done so for over 1 million years.
Well, I've got words with that guy. He hasn't written a very good script.
Well, this particular gentleman has been that race, which are basically primarily one of the first races that came into existence. They don't die, okay? And they are like there's a lot of different aliens that come together. They're all part of a cooperative. Now that doesn't include, because he won't speak about reptilians and draconians, will he? No, he doesn't talk about them. They don't follow those rules. But this mob there, They've been here watching us, part of this experiment now, for millions of years. Mesref has been here for 1 million years, but he wasn't here when the first ring was made and given to the Atlanteans and Lemurians, but he was involved in the other three. So it's a difficult story, because what we're talking about is the first race that came here, that actually landed here and came onto this planet to try and heal it, was basically Mesref would call in their younger brothers and sisters, didn't he? And they are a race that lives forever also. And they came here for a period of time. They were called here by the trees, not the reptilians, not the sapiens, but by the trees. They were called, we're told, around about 1 million years ago, at a stage when the reptilians were still in control. And the story was that the trees were being cut down. There was pollution everywhere. There was fear and warfare. And the trees called this race to come and heal and cleanse this planet. So the story of this planet and all the different beings in here is a story that doesn't just reverberate around this planet. It reverberates around the cosmos. And they look upon Lemuria as the culmination, the peak of humanity. This is where we were, as they would call it, we were using earth magic. And this is something we're told, this particular capacity for us to use earth magic is the major reason that many of these aliens are here. And it comes from Lemuria. And that's why they say to this day, Lemuria has not been destroyed, it still exists. It's a philosophy. And you can see it in every indigenous religion and lifestyle on this planet. The world is broken up into two lifestyles, Lemurian and Atlantean. Atlanteans compete with nature, Lemurians work with nature. So when we talk about this, if you look at the original people of 250 years ago, before the whites came here with the first invasion fleet, that was purely Lemuria. It hadn't sunk. It hadn't disappeared. This is the point that people need to understand. It was not gone from anywhere. It was still here. And when the British came, I swear to you, those at the highest level knew damn well what this place represented and why it was the last place to be changed. They went to America first and they tried to get rid of their hunter-gatherer indigenous lifestyle there, because that was the lifestyle of Lemuria. We are told by our alien friends that the population of Lemuria never exceeded 1 million. They kept it small, whereas Atlantis exceeded tens of millions, and they grew. And you've got two different contradictory lifestyles that continued through colonialism. It was still taking place then. You go through America before the whites were there, they were living a Pleiadian Lemurian lifestyle. And so they were in South America, so they were in the Pacific Islands, so they were in Australia. And then you had the colonialists, the ones who were competing against nature, that were making warfare guns and all the things we've done before. And they went out and destroyed those lifestyles. It was deliberate. So that they now say you can't live that way anymore. Well, you can. But they made it hard.
So it's sort of the difference between
Jeff.
It's sort of the difference between the animistic philosophies, shamanism, basically, and sort of the religions that sort of led to settlements, cities, empire, and sort of humans dominating the world rather than sort of trying to coexist with it.
That's it. We're back again. This is Atlantis is reborn. This is why these rings were found in the last 5 years. Because they could feel it all around them. They could feel the way we were falling apart, the destruction, the fear, the pollution. I mean, for God's sake, I was watching the cricket on TV. And except when they went to the Himalayas, you can't see in India more than 1 kilometre in any direction. It's great.
So Lemuria itself...
The air is filthy. We don't even understand. This is exactly what happened to Atlantis way back. We're doing the same things again.
How did if we were going to put this in modern terms, though, Lemuria obviously had a very restrictive immigration policy. They had population controls. In some ways, if you just take those two factoids alone, it sounds like a police state. But obviously it's something where the entire populace adopted the same philosophy. So it was more communal than dictated from the top. It was everyone bottom up. Well, maybe there was no bottom up, but everyone sort of adhered to the same, not belief system, but knowledge that we can't let ourselves grow more than this and have more than X number of people. I guess 50,000 is that magic number in one location in order to preserve our resources, the Earth's balance. Is that sort of? Am I saying that sort of close?
That's spot on. That's exactly what it's about. It's about two ways of working with nature. One is to pull it apart and reassemble it in your own image, and the other one is for you to assemble yourself in the image of nature.
So I'm going to ask you some opinions.
That is the Lemurian content, and that is the Atlantean content. And like Mesra said, that the ring that was made at the very beginning was the only time on this planet when East met West not in conflict, but in concord, in agreement, in a general philosophy on how we live on the whole of this planet. I mean, you've only got to go back to the Bible and you'll hear there was a story about the Tower of Babel, and before that everyone spoke one language. This is part of what we've got. We actually have a copy of the first language, and we're putting it out in a series of books. If everyone's speaking the same language, guess what? You've got trust coming back again. When you don't understand what someone says, you're not sure what they're about, you rely on someone else to tell you what they're saying, we have a problem. Has continued
so you've got the first language. Have you translated it?
Yep.
Oh, that's amazing.
What happened was it was the first language, and it was kept by the original people. It's called Murray Gawalda, and a gentleman, a lady, Eliza
Hamilton Dunlop.
Right, in the 1830s. That's only about 40 years after Phillips turned up to start settling there. Her and her husband, who was the magistrate, were working in the Wallamai district, which is near Darkingham country, and she was translating poems, she was translating songs, and she won the trust of the original people there, and they gave her the full dictionary of the first language, which is the language that everyone on the planet spoke. And we got the person who was given that, we got his handwritten stuff telling us what the language was, and quite recently haven't found the handwritten stuff that she wrote of all the first words. Now, what's fascinating about the first language, it's based around 17 base words, and they're all incredibly spiritual. Oh, you could get a quote from there. I'll get Evan to read a quote from there. This is the Lemurian language, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. And Evan's going to read a quote where it's been translated. And it'll give you an idea of what Lemuria was about. Now, Evan, you've got some quote there from, you've got some there. He's now going to read from a guy called Frederick Slater, who was the president of the Australian Archaeological Society when he got a hold of this paper. And it was a paper written in the 1830s. And he was translating everything in Australia. And in the 1930s, there's stories about him going to a site that they hadn't read for 25 years. And in 10 minutes, he'd read the whole site because he had this book with him. Now, what did they speak about? Evan, would you read the sort of quotes that we've got to give you an idea what Lemurian language is?
The breath of God is the divine light of the soul. The light of truth rose like a river of fire from God to the soul of man and women united. The soul of man came from the immortal light to drink the waters of life from God. Life comes in and life goes out in darkness to the light that holds it forever.
So there's just a few quotes of different passages he's translated. Now, what I can tell you about this, they call this the soul language. Right? We don't call our language today the soul language. What's up, bro, is not soul language. This was all about spiritual concerns, and it was all about making congress with the land, with the spirits, and with your soul. That was all it was about. This language should only be spoken when you're doing ceremony. And yes, we've got the complete copy. We know all of the words. There are 17 words. And we've got an example there where Slater wrote down what he did was he took one word, which was the word mu. which is one of the 10 sacred words, by the way. Then he showed us how they had about 30 prefixes and 30 suffixes. You can add things on the start and the finish of that word, and it changes it. And there's about 9 different words that have mu in there, and they've all got variations. They've still got the same base, but different things are added to it. And Slater had compiled the language, and the first language, by the way, now the experts will tell you the first language is made up of 24 grunts and groans. The first language was made up of 28,000 words. Now, people might think this is ridiculous, but I want to share something with you, Jeff. In 1938, he wrote this book called Murray Gewalder, Scribes of the Stone Age it was called. We've got the book. We've got the original was blown up. It was accepted for publication in London. Now, in Australia, before the Second World War, getting your book accepted for publication in London is the top of the list. Now, this guy was writing about the fact that there was a first language spoken by everyone, and the original people are owners of the highest civilization that ever existed. He's writing that in 1939, and I can tell you mainstream Australia don't believe any of it. So that is what Lemuria is about. And what you just heard then gives you a little flavour as to the way they set up their society, their culture, their religion, their expectations on life. They were all living a life of priests and priestesses.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Magic and earth magic was the basis of everything that happened in this country.
I have 2 questions on the translations. One, I mean, the word God was mentioned many times. So if it's possible to pronounce the original language, how did their word for God sound, and who's their God?
We actually asked the aliens that, and their name for their God is Akashi.
Akashi.
In our case, the God, oh man, it's a tricky one because they talk about, look, you know the mob that come from up there, they don't call them angels, right? They call them sky heroes. I want to make this point clear, Jeff. They don't refer to the spirits. Like Bayami is a sky hero. And we've got Slater's story about Bayami, haven't we? And Bayami's wife, whose name is Burunagulu, he made it clear there, she was not born of this planet. She was born from a constellation up there. And the son of Bayami, no name. That's right, he didn't like it. The nameless one. He didn't like it here. And he left him. And his brother, Bubadi, chased him. He said, come back. He said, no, I'm going. And it said he climbed up to a tree that mingled with the clouds. And when the tree left, there was fire and smoke that came out of the bottom. And he went up to the Southern Cross, and that's where his destination was. The stories in first language, the most common translation of this Lemurian tongue, the word that I've seen the most is came to earth. Came to earth. With 7 senses, isn't it? Yep. 7 senses fully developed, and people say we've only got 5. No, we've got 7. We've lost 2. They were there. And those 7 senses, the other 2 relate to earth magic, of course. So when you read this language, and we put out the first book, and we're putting out the second book, which will have the complete breakdown of the 17 sacred words and how they're spoken, and we're going to give page after page giving up this language, and we're going to get into a lot of trouble. Well, a lot of original people saying it's our language, why should we be giving it to others? My answer is, well, according to Slater, we gave it to the world. And this language of pure soul and spirit, I believe this world needs it again. We need to know these words. And when people start saying these words, and I won't say them today yet because we'll put this out when we finally do, I've used these words on elders and I've seen the reaction on them. Is
this the language that was pre-Babel and what some people call the angelic language? And they're
it is the angelic language. They call it the spirit language, the spirit, the angels, spirit. What's the difference?
Right.
It's called spirit language, soul language, and it is that first language we spoke about. What was written in the Bible was correct.
Listen,
what you've got to understand is the speakers were original. It started here, and we've got the actual 17 words. We know what they are. We know what they mean.
Right. The Greek word... The Greek word angels is angelos. I mean, angel. It means messengers, and that's what malaki means in Hebrew as well, as messengers. You know,
Exactly.
it's just been translated into something.
Messengers who came from afar and brought us wisdom and shared it with us, and we forgot it. But they came to us, and Mesrus has made this clear every time, that every alien in the cosmos has something, acknowledges something about humans that they wish to copy, that they admire. And that, for me, I've got to tell you, Jeff, that was always been an issue for me, because I've looked around. I was a history teacher, and I've looked at the history, and I've looked around, and I'm looking. I can't find much that's admirable at the moment. But there is something about us, and I think it's got something to do with Earth magic, but I can't tie Mesrith down on that. What I can tell you is that they believe up there that we should not even be looking for Atlantis. We should be seeking out Lemuria. We should be seeking out the wisdom of Lemuria. The wisdom, and it's not that hard to find because the Hopi still keep it, the Navajo still keep it, the Iraq will still keep it. All of the indigenous people of the planet still have that wisdom. It's not gone. And the story is we have to find it again. The Hopi said when the change is coming, which it is, he said you must go back to the old teachings. And if you don't go back to the old teachings, you will not stay on this planet. They're adamant, aren't they?
Yeah.
They say that time after time, jump into the fast-flowing river and celebrate with those in that river. And for the ones who don't join you, look away. And remember, that's even in the Bible. The line that's before, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, the line before tells you about the ones who had it before and how they'll all disappear in a puff of smoke, and when you look back, they shall be gone. And then, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. They don't tell you how that happened. Mm-hmm. The Hopi do too. They say that there'll be a change that takes place. And it happened in Lemuria. It happened at Uluru 3 years ago. There was a ceremony that changed the world. And what the Hopi speak about the blue kachinas coming, they are. Now, these prophecies are Lemurian prophecies. They come from the indigenous people about the change. You don't get any of these prophecies from the Atlanteans. So there is a big difference here.
Are the original people of Australia, are they what you would call Lemurians as well then? Or descendants of Lemurians? Or is there a difference?
But they don't, not all of them know it, because let's be honest, we're talking about keepers of earth magic, keepers of the first language. The ones like that, there are original people alive today that still have this, but I've got to tell you, we won't be counting them in the hundreds.
What about...
We'll be counting them in the tens, won't we? They're around. I mean, I was working, and Evans we were with an original person who did miracles. He did things that break every law. On one occasion, he did it to Graham Hancock and Santha, his wife. He did things that when you look at, you say, how did Kano walk out of that fire pit and then disappear in front of 10 people? And no one could see him for a minute. Then he reappears standing behind his wife, didn't he?
With a big smile.
With a big smile on his face. And I ran up and he said, go and ask him how he did that. I said, I'm not going near him. I'm not asking that one. Those sort of things that we've seen our elders do, disappearing. We've seen that happen. Now, in fact, I'm going to a court case in Australia, and I've been asked to justify in a court that original people could disappear. And it's a strange story, but I've been called next year to talk about the fact that we could disappear. What I'm saying is that the earth magic that was taking place in Australia, Lemuria, was not equalled anywhere. Not just here, but anywhere. And what we did was we decided to throw it away and get flat screen TVs and get fast cars and all sorts of other things instead. Bad choice.
What is the basis of the earth magic, and is it because of the location of the land, or is it because of the Lemurians and their headspace and their beliefs that they were able to harness it? In other words, is that magic everywhere? It's just no one else thought the right way to bring it, or is there something special in that geography which allowed people in the right headspace to use it and forge a society with it?
Both ways, isn't it?
Both ways. I'll give you an example of the have to be in the right time, right place. So we were invited to go. Well, we didn't know what it was. It was just, I'll show you a site.
Say good site.
We're sitting around having dinner, and I'm like, oh well, it must be on the path or something because it's night now and it's dark. Like, we're not going to wander off into the bush like we would do in the day. Surely not.
And there was no moon that night.
Yeah, so here we are, and then he's driven us into the middle of a national park and then pointed at a distant silhouette of a mountain kilometres away and going, I'll be over there.
You come and find me.
Yeah, and you may or may not find me. Anyway, and don't help each other, spread out. Oh, and there are funnel webs, which are a really poisonous spider.
Kill.
So maybe you want to put your arms out first, I don't know, and then disappear immediately, and we're like, okay. But we did manage to find where he was eventually. He was up a tree at that point in time.
That's right.
Freaking us out deliberately. But
what about when he made us, there's another one he made us do in the middle of the night when it's pitch black, you had to run 150 metres flat out and you couldn't see where you were running. Fair dinkum. I didn't want to do that because I was 60-something at the time. He said, well, then, you can go back to the car.
But, yeah, to give you an example of the interplay, like that particular site, we were able to do things like probably the penultimate one was disappear in front of each other. And there was about 8 to 10 of us, and each person would walk to the end of a platform of rock. And then
there's a portal there, and it opens up. This is what we were saying. You said, is it geographic? This opens up the same time each year at the same time for a period of time.
Yeah. So what happened was, say, it's me. I've walked to the end. We're having a chat backwards and forwards. I then get to the end, and then for the onlookers, they can't see me anymore. They can still communicate with me and talk to me, but I've completely disappeared. And then he said, take one step forward, which I did, and he did this well. Over all the 10 people did it. And then you would reappear, but you would reappear about a foot.
I reckon it was 2 feet, man. I reckon it was 2 feet. Anyway.
Like taller than our actual height, right? So, and then one more step, and then you shrink down to your normal size. And then each person did that, except for one person at the end. And we went, why can we see them and we couldn't see anyone else? And we called out to him and like, we can still see you. And then he's behind us going, that's not me.
That's right, it was him.
I'm here. I don't know who you're talking to, someone else.
But he looked exactly the same as old mate that said it's not me. I'm looking at him and the other guy saying, yes, it is, mate, that's you.
But, I mean, yeah, that's an example of a geographic connection.
But in Kano's case, somebody did go up and ask him the next day, because I wasn't. Kano's my elder, and you don't ask elders questions, because I only ask you other questions you can't answer. Someone did come up to him the next day and said, Kano, how did you do that? Because Graham Hancock was there and he was shocked and his wife was there and they're all asking the same question. What happened? And he told them. And he said to him, he said, can you see that portal over there? And the guy said, no. He said, well, I'll bring it closer. And he did. He called it and it came closer right next to him. Can you see it now? He said, no. He said, well, that's the difference between you and me. He said, I can see the portal and when I walk in there, you can't see me anymore. He said, but what I'm doing, every human on this planet can do. You've just forgotten how to do it. So what he was saying was, okay, we can do this magic. Look, I've seen him do so many different things now that I just gave up fighting. This is ridiculous. I can't believe it, but it's true. But the point you've got to remember was these were what this planet, what this place was about, where everyone could do what Kano could do and everyone could do what Bob Crombie could do. These people still know about these places. In Kano's case, he could call the portal. In Bob's case, he takes you to the portal, doesn't it? And it opens up. Now, that's actually what I've got to do a presentation with the Supreme Court in South Australia on. So that's going to be fascinating in February next year, I can tell you, because the judge is not very happy about this. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is that is what, to an extent, that is what drew aliens from all over the cosmos to this planet. This planet is considered the most magical, if not the most magical. I do remember asking Mesref before whether there are many planets with trees. He said quite a few. He said, but none are as spiritual as the trees on this planet. And what are the trees? They're the lungs of this earth, aren't they? They create oxygen for us. Without that, we wouldn't breathe. They keep us alive, and they're also a spiritual entity of incredible importance. So what we've been told is this planet, and Lemuria was the focal point. And you've got to remember the spiritual navel of this planet is Uluru. That's where the ceremony took place, the Pleiadian ceremony about 3.5 years ago. It happened at Uluru when this earth was reactivated again. So we're now in what I call the post-reactivation stage, where primarily humans are trying to work out whether they've got a lifestyle that mean that they can stay on this planet. Because there's a day in the future where the human residence is going to peak in the thousands, and unless you're an evolved soul, your body will not be able to cope. And that's what the Hopi speak about, don't they, Evan? It's what the Adamartha speak about. It's what all the indigenous people have been speaking about for the last 4, 5, 10 years, about the ceremony that was coming, and it was happening where? In the vestiges of Lemuria. Why? Because this is the spiritual navel of the planet.
Did they have a military or a police? Did they have a need for one? I mean, they were outsiders, of course. They wouldn't let you could be a visitor, but you couldn't stay. I mean, there had to be some way to enforce it. Obviously, with the off-worlders, that was like an honor system. Obviously, they were well beyond us. But say someone from Atlantis came to visit and wanted to stay. Yeah, how could they enforce the rule, or did they not need a military or police because they could manipulate the magic?
They did not need a military or police, yet the Atlanteans, with a great military power, would not go near them. They wouldn't go near them because of their magic was so powerful that it doesn't matter what bow, what gun, what anything you have, their magic is stronger. So did they have police? No.
But they didn't need it.
But they do have Gadaitcha men, don't they?
Yes.
They do have, and then the original people had a Gadaitcha man.
What is that?
How does a Gadaitcha man work? What happens is this. A Gadaitcha man is a man that looks after protocol and law, L-A-W and L-O-R-E. And what will happen is that if someone did break a law, and there are certain laws, most of them are spiritual, desecration of a sacred site would be punishable by death. Rape is punishable by death. So yes, they do have structure. Now, the story is this. Let's take an example of rape. And there was a story, a film. There was a book called Women of the Sun, and it was put into a series on the ABC, and they played out a scene where 2 white fellas were adopted at the very beginning. They were convicts and they escaped, and they were adopted by an Aboriginal tribe, and one of the men raped a woman. And they brought that man out in front of all the men in a circle, and the woman accused him of raping her, and of course that was the end of the trial. All of the women were now crying because they said, I was raped too. They took on the collective pain that woman was going through. Then all the men who were married to those women were then outraged that their wife had been raped by this man. So what then happens is he stands inside a circle and is given one shield. He's not allowed to move. And each man picks up 2 spears, and if he can dodge every spear, he's not guilty. Now, what do these original people do for a living? They hunt with what? Their spears. And they're chasing kangaroo that move at 40, 45k and can move in the air 3 directions. This guy's standing perfectly still and has one spear, one shield that can deflect the first spear only. Then it breaks. They all got killed. They were killed because they broke the law. Now, what can you do to get away from this? And let me explain. There was a way of doing this. You could run away. And you know what? They'd let you go. And you know what that would mean? You're now not in the country you were born, not with the spirits that created you. You're in another country, and when your soul dies, it can never reincarnate again. You will be lost for an eternity. You would ask them to kill me on country because you can come back to your country. This is how they think, right? So their law is self-regulated. Nobody argues the point that somebody was told, the little bird told that elder that you broke that law. We can't argue with that, can we? Because the bird's a messenger, isn't it?
Right.
So we can't then say, we can't get a solicitor to say, I had a bad day and I woke up upset. That's not going to work. It was an accident. They say to you, you're responsible for what you do. If it's an accident and you cause damage, that's your fault. You can't use that. So primarily what you would hope was if you've done a really bad crime, you would hope that they killed you. What you wouldn't want is freedom. Because now you don't belong to any tribe and the other tribe can't adopt you because you shouldn't be on their land anyway. And they've got a right to kill you for being there. And if you do get killed, you can't get back to your own land. So see what's happened here. They have a religious belief where they all believe without exception that there is a creator and the spirits are in the land and watching everything you do, which means that you can't get away with anything. So do we need an army and a navy and an air force and a police force? No, we don't. We need a Elijah man that's in contact with the spirits, and when the spirits told him this person's broken the law, they've done a sacrilegious thing, they've raped a woman, and they must be killed. Now who's going to defend them? Nobody. Nobody. Who's going to look after them if they escape? Nobody. Nobody. And so now what you have, you've got a system where you know the spirits are everywhere and watching every step you do and do and say and think, and therefore when you're caught out, you have to wear it. And if you don't wear it and run away, that's worse. You prefer to die.
So you basically,
so as a result,
banishment.
When you live in a society like that, where's your prison? Your prison is freedom. That's not how we do it here. So that's why they don't need the police, because the animals will tell the elder that you've done it. You can't keep it a secret. And remember, in original society, lying is on a level that would, no, you'd probably get you speared in the leg for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
For a lie. You get speared in the leg and you'd hobble for the rest of your life. You can't lie, you're not allowed to. You've got a clan of 40 or 50 people you're working with and they're all trusting each other to stay alive. You can't have people spreading lies and creating mischief, because that destroys the whole fabric of society. So when you look at the way the original people were living, they never had a prison. And of course, when the whites came here, they said, well, they're ignorant, aren't they? They don't have a legal system we can see. They don't have a law court. They don't have a prison. They must be ignorant. No, they were so advanced they didn't need one.
Right.
So no, there wasn't.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't want to get into their code of justice, but it sounds like if you were in communication with nature, there's always a witness. So due process was, they couldn't say the birds and the trees, were lying as well.
Exactly. You're with them all the time, man. You're not going to do this sort of stuff. And when we talk about these things like rape, rarely if ever happened, because they knew the result. They knew what was going to happen. They knew they couldn't keep it away from the spirits. They'd see it. They'd see through your soul and you'd be given up. Now, if everyone believes that in their heart and soul, man, we don't spend money on prisons anymore. We don't spend money. I mean, it's hard. I've got to tell you, it's tough. I mean, if you do something minor, you might be lucky. They might put your hand down on a rock somewhere and just get another hand and just smash your knuckles, mightn't they? That's a very favourite one. You've got to be careful when you're living there, bud, because if you do something wrong that upsets the group, the majority, and creates mistrust, it must be dealt with immediately. It's not going to be 2 years before the court case comes up. It's going to be 2 seconds.
Right. It's collective and it's immediate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had stated that the Lemuria was the focal point because it's the navel of the world, but the planet itself is magic. So is there any truth to like places like Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt, or the pyramids in?
They are incredibly powerful sacred places. They have incredibly powerful ley lines that run. You've got to look at the ley lines as the blood of this planet.
But they all run to and from the navel.
And it throbs and it goes from place to place to place. Now, sometimes ignorant people in Australia say, well, that's sacred, that little spot there will destroy everything around it. Well, what they don't realise is that's a sacred place that's joined to that sacred place, to that one, to that one, to that one, by these ley lines. And think about them as being veins, arteries in your body. It's the same thing. This is a magical planet, as magical as it will ever become. And that energy, whether it's the air that it's breathed out through the lungs of the trees or whether it's the actual ley lines themselves, that's the body of Gaia. That's its magic essence that runs there. So when we talk about Stonehenge and we talk about these amazing places, and some cynics and some scientists say, well, no, they're just rocks. No, they're wrong. They're wrong. The rocks are sacred. The place is sacred. And a lot of people go there and can feel it. I remember once we went to a site that was incredibly sacred, and Sean was with us. And he put 2 batteries on top of this particular rock. You remember the rock, don't you?
Yeah.
And he came back 10 minutes later and the batteries were dead. And he said, I've only ever done that once before. He said, I put my batteries on a rock at Stonehenge and they came back 10 minutes later. And I said, I had nothing. It was fully charged. It sucked all the energy out of it straight away. Now, that happened at Stonehenge and it happened in Carryong, near Carryong in New South Wales. And Stonehenge and Carryong are probably the 2 furthest extremes on this planet from one another, but both of them can drain batteries. Batteries that are scientific. And this guy, by the way, he's a top-class photographer, isn't he? He works for Fox. He works for, he does this for a living. He's not just a punter. He does this the whole of his life as a living. And he told us straight out, that rock has sucked all of the energy out of my batteries. I've got nothing left. And it's happened before.
Okay.
So, yeah, Stonehenge, that's one rock. The rock we're talking about, which had a lobster engraved into it, that just refreshed itself all the time, didn't it, Evan?
Yeah.
Well, same thing.
I've been watching the clock, and I know that you have about 10 minutes before your 5-minute countdown to your next commitment. So I know you said that Lemuria is not extinct, but obviously it's not at its height, mostly because it's been corrupted by us, people. When did its contraction start? Was it when the land between India and Australia was disconnected? It doesn't sound like it, but it sounds like that was done by the women purposefully to keep people here. Not here, but there, Australia. So when did it construct? I mean, it couldn't have been the 1800s when the British came. It had to start earlier than that.
No, it started. Actually, I can give you the date. It's the 20th December 2020. It happened when the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, along with the summer solstice, took place at Uluru. Now, they've been doing ceremonies for 9 years leading up to that moment. And I can tell you, at 10 o'clock in the morning of that day and the next day, everyone that was looking at Uluru, and there were thousands of people there, were kicked off.
Okay, so that's when it restarted.
That's when it restarted.
When did it fall?
It never fell. That's what Mesref has said time after time. Lemuria never fell. He's made that clear. He always objects when we say, when did it fall? Because it didn't. And what it did was it waited. It waited for that time, for that ceremony that took place 3 years ago. Now, if you go to our website, you can see at 7:36, we've got film of Uluru exploding into a massive white light that covers the whole of the horizon, but doesn't touch the rock. It came out at 6, so about 4 minutes after the ceremony began.
Well, let's not use
the beginning.
Let's not use extinction. Let's say dormancy. When did it start waiting? When did it go to sleep? I understand that it got reset about 3.5 years ago at the ceremony. Yeah. But, I mean, was it similar to Atlantis 12,000 or 13,000 years ago, or was it before, after? Which stories from around the world, which time period, in using, standard AD, BC,
Okay, 12,000 years of Younger Dryas is when we had the big conflagration where 90 to 95% of the world's population disappeared in a day and nobody knows why. So that's when the whole thing blew up.
So Atlantis and Lemuria. So Atlantis and Lemuria around the same time?
Some of it sank. Yeah, it sank. Obviously, the land bridge that joins Sri Lanka, Australia, and the Kimberleys, it sank around that time, and so did some of the others. But it wasn't like one day and the whole thing gets blown up, which it did in Atlantis. This was more gradual. Mm-hmm. And therefore, people had time to readapt. And they did. They retreated to the high mountains that then became islands in different places. So I would say that from that time until the beginning of the ceremony is about 9 years before this happened. It would have been in stasis, waiting.
Okay. Last question.
And they would have known. It would have been passed on from generation to generation. Because I can tell you, we were there, and most of the original people at Uluru didn't know a thing about it either. Everyone was kicked off. This was secret, sacred business for the very few. So that was the beginning. What it was meant to do was there were crystals placed inside Uluru. We believe they're Pleiadian, right? They were placed inside Lemuria because they knew that further on in the piece this time would come and it would be sung up, and it has been sung up. And we believe now, and we've got film, we've got lots of film of different things that happened on that day around the world to show you. The two Kachinas, the two blue brothers, were in the sky in the northern and southern hemisphere. We've got film of that. Everything that was supposed to happen, all the prophecies came to fruition then. Everything before that was basically just treading water. And we have been for quite some time, for thousands and thousands of years. But this, what we've got now, we're now treading water, and we're going to have to do it harder and harder because it's going to get more difficult.
All right, last question, I promise.
Tell us there'll be a few decades before the change will be complete, and then there'll be that day. They talk about a sort of a rainbow mist, don't they? The Hopis speak about a rainbow mist that will make itself around the world. And when the mist is finished, many will have gone. That's primarily, but don't ask me how because I don't know.
No, I'm not going to ask you that.
I don't know.
But I do want to ask you, and this is my last question, I promise.
Yeah.
You indicated that after, some of Lemuria sank, but some people were given time to escape to large mountains, which became islands. So aside from Australia, where are the other surviving sort of high points of Lemurian culture that exists now?
All right. Well, obviously, we've got to include India, right, and Sri Lanka. That was a join together. That's been clearly told to us, so that's part of it. We have to include New Zealand. And I'm of the opinion, and it runs up, I think, to Asia too. I think it can even run up to Angkor Wat.
Yeah, to Switzerland.
Yeah. And I think that Australia at that stage had Tasmania and Papua New Guinea joined on, so that's part of that too. That would have been part of it. I believe that was the main distinct landmass as such. Then what we're talking about apart from that, when we go out to the Pacific Islands, you've got Easter Island, you've got Hawaii, you've got those other ones. There would have been a time when the water was lower and sometimes may not have been there, but that's separate. We believe that Australia was the focal point of Lemuria and that Uluru was the focal point of Lemuria, and it's still there. And if you look at it today, Uluru is nearly, basically, if you look at it from every point of view, in nearly the centre of Australia right now, from every possible direction. So we believe that was, as I said, we don't believe, and Mesrith has said the same thing, Lemuria never disappeared. We made it disappear by invading the countries that kept the Lemurian tradition of animism, of indigenous culture. And I include the Druids in this too, by the way. I'm including all groups, the pagans, the Druids, those people that were doing that. It's not just Anglo-Saxons who are one group. There were many who were still living, Goths, Gothic people, all of those people still living the same Lemurian way. So I look upon all the esoteric religions, and that can even include the whirling dervish, can't it, Evan? They're all part of that tradition of finding your salvation yourself.
Okay.
Then we have the other group.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for that information, that presentation. It's really fascinating. This is your time to tell everyone where they can find you and about the books and the book that's forthcoming and how they can get it.
Yeah, so look, we've got two websites. One's ForgottenOrigin.com, so that's got all of our articles, some of which were discussed today, including the rings and some of everything from genetics to archaeology is all on there. Also, we have our Alien Ancestry, which is our other website, which is more focused on the conferences that we usually do every month.
We've done about 35, haven't we?
Yeah, 35.
For those people who've never seen them, if you become a member, you get open access to all of them. And there's about nearly 200 hours, I'd say.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. We've had all sorts
of elders.
Guests on, Freddie Silver, Michael Tallinger, and then elders, other writers. So that's all on there. So, yeah, they're the two main things. We're on YouTube and all social media, Psy as well. But, yeah, just look for our Alien Ancestry and Forgotten Origin, and then that'll be us. The books are available through there. If you're overseas, just Barnes & Noble. Some books are on Amazon, some aren't. That's a long story. I got to check that actually. But and if you're in Australia, we mail out the books, sign them. Obviously, we can't do that overseas. It's way expensive to send things from here to anywhere. But so we've got a few books floating around between a rock and a hard place. The
Conversation with an alien, interview with an alien, and the one about the languages. That's
Frederick Slater, Genius of Mischievous.
That's right.
And that's book one of that. So there's a couple. There's an audio book on some of them, ebooks. So no matter what format, we've got them. So there's my little spiel.
That's all right. That's exactly what that section was for your spiel. All right, thank you. I think you have a minute to spare to go to your presentation. Again, thanks so much. Thank you to Stephen Evan Strong. Thank you all for listening to Garden of Doom, and you'll hear from us next week.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, mate. We appreciate it big time.
Climbed aboard the Dreamweaver train. Driver, take away my worries of today and leave tomorrow behind. Oh, Dreamweaver, I believe you can get me through the night. Today's pain. Oh, Dreamweaver, I believe you can get me through the night. Oh, Dreamweaver, I believe we can reach the morning light. Though the dawn may be coming soon, there still may be some time. Fly me